Welcome to tonight's episode of Interesting History. Have you ever wondered how people from the ancient world sought ways to feel euphoric, relieve pain, or simply escape the mundane? Tonight's journey will gently guide you through that fascinating haze of human history. We're about to explore how people used to get high in ancient times, from sacred rituals and plant-based brews to mystical incenses and fermented concoctions. So fluff your pillow, close your eyes, and let the past wrap around you like a warm, oddly scented fog. And while you slowly drift off, don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy calming tales from history. I'd love to hear where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. So leave a comment below and join our sleepy little time-traveling community. Now, let us begin. Let's begin at the beginning, not with thunder or great battles, but with the quiet ripple of water beneath a reed boat gliding across the Nile. The sky is pale gold, a heron lifts into the breeze, papyrus rustles. It is morning in ancient Egypt, and the world has not yet become noise. The air still carries the mystery of dreams. The Nile is not merely a river, it is the great spine of the Egyptian world, the highway of gods and men, of goods and souls. And along its lush banks grows something more than just reeds and water lilies. It is a flower, delicate yet commanding, whose scent lingers like a whisper in the heat. It is the blue lotus. Now close your eyes, just for a moment. Picture the scene. A priestess in a linen gown stands in a stone courtyard, its pillars carved with hieroglyphs of falcons, serpents, and gods. She holds a bowl in her hand, shallow, elegant. Inside it floats the unmistakable shape of blue lotus petals, steeped in deep red wine. She lifts the bowl to her lips, not in thirst, but in reverence, and then very slowly, she drinks. The blue lotus was no ordinary flower in ancient Egypt. It was not just botanical, it was mythic. It opened with the morning sun and closed with the dusk. It symbolized creation itself, rebirth, divine awakening. In the mythology of Heliopolis, the sun god Re first emerged from the petals of the lotus when the world was still a formless sea. The flower was cosmic, and so was its effect. But more than symbol, it was sensation. The Egyptians soaked its petals in wine, allowing the psychoactive compounds to gently infuse the liquid. It wasn't strong, you didn't see gods, but you felt them. There was a warmth, a floating feeling, a quiet joy. Muscles softened, laughter came easily, and the world for a little while felt closer to the heavens. Historians and botanists have long debated exactly what made the blue lotus so potent. Some believe the flower contains apomorphine and nuciferine, compounds that can act as sedatives or mild euphoriants. But the Egyptians didn't need chemical analyses. They knew it worked, and more importantly, they knew when and how to use it. Imagine yourself reclining on a low couch, a woven mat beneath you, the smell of incense in the air. The walls flicker with torchlight. Musicians pluck lyres, their notes floating lazily upward. A servant hands you a cup, deep, aromatic, heavy with blue lotus wine. You drink, you smile, your limbs grow loose. Conversation around you turns dreamy, meandering. It is not intoxication in the modern sense. It is a soft letting go. These banquets weren't just about food and laughter. They were acts of reverence. The god Nefertem, often depicted with a lotus on his head, was the patron of perfumes, healing, and beauty. To consume the lotus was to walk in his footsteps, and many Egyptians hoped that even in death they would rise like the lotus in the next life. In tombs, images of lotus flowers appear on walls, sarcophagi, and amulets. Some mummies were even buried with dried lotus petals, placed upon their chests, as if to say, "May your soul bloom anew far from pain and time." But Egypt, for all its magnificence, was not the only civilization in the ancient world to indulge in nature's sacred gifts. As the Nile meets the desert and the sun sets over Thebes, let us drift eastward, over the arid lands and toward the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia. Here, nestled between the Tigris and the Euphrates, stood the great cities of Urdu, Nippur, and Babylon. This was the land of writing, of laws, of towering ziggurats that touched the heavens. It was also a land of gardens, canals and cultivated knowledge, especially knowledge of plants. And among these plants was one held in special regard, the opium poppy. The Sumerians, one of the earliest known peoples of Mesopotamia, referred to it as hul-gil, the joy plant. Even the name sounds like a sigh of contentment. The joy plant was grown in gardens and collected for its sap, a thick, milky resin that could be dried and consumed. It was known to still pain, calm troubled minds, and perhaps, depending on dosage, deliver dreams worth chasing. But unlike the modern world, ancient Mesopotamians didn't draw harsh lines between medicine and mysticism. To heal the body was to heal the soul, and substances that dulled suffering were seen not just as remedies, but as tools for divine access. Imagine a temple courtyard in the city of Nippur. The sun is high, the stone walls shimmering with heat. A high priest robed in wool and embroidered linen kneels beside a clay jar. He dips a slender reed into a bowl of honey wine, laced with crushed poppy. He chants softly, lips moving in rhythmic syllables, calling to Gula, goddess of healing. Then he sips. He is not looking to get drunk. He is opening his senses, preparing to speak to the spirits of the sick. Perhaps tonight he will dream of cures whispered by gods. Even outside the temple, the joy plant had its place. It was used by scribes and merchants, by midwives and poets, not always daily, but often carefully, with respect. Opium was sometimes added to beer, stirred into stews, or mixed with barley cakes to be chewed slowly under starlight. Trade records inscribed in cuneiform show us that poppy resin was a prized commodity. It moved in caravans across the land, packed in jars and sealed with wax. The wealthy stocked it in their homes. Apothecaries, those early pharmacists of the ancient world, crafted recipes with it, alongside juniper, garlic, and dates. But like all things potent, it came with caution. In Hammurabi's code, one of the oldest known legal systems, there are passages governing trade, including the adulteration of wine and oils. This implies a knowledge of dosage, mixture, and misuse. Even then, people understood that what heals can also harm. And yet, the desire to explore altered states remained, not to escape reality, but to understand it better, or perhaps to sit beside it, for a while, without its usual burdens. If you walk the streets of Ur at night, you might hear soft music drifting from a tavern, the tinkling sound of ceramic jugs being passed. Someone inside has mixed poppy juice into a jug of strong beer. They lean against the wall, eyes half-lidded, talking slowly about stars, sheep, and the strange feeling of flying. Were they hedonists, addicts? Not likely. They were humans, just like you, searching for comfort, for clarity, for a glimpse of something beyond. Across these civilizations, from the papyrus hulls of Egypt to the clay tablets of Babylon, a quiet truth was forming, that nature holds keys, and that the human spirit, ever curious, will always reach for them. Some keys open doors of healing, others open dreams, some do both. The blue lotus and the poppy were not seen as drugs. They were bridges, between man and God, between pain and peace, between the waking world and the one we enter when our eyes grow heavy. And so, as you lie here now, the hum of the present fading into background silence, let your thoughts drift like petals on water. Imagine the scent of lotus in your nostrils, the cool clay walls of a temple around you, the flicker of torches, the chant of a priest, the ancient joy plant pressed gently into your hand. You take a sip, the world quiets, a god speaks in the stillness, and you begin to float. Let us now turn our gaze northward, far beyond the warm temples and sunlit rivers of Egypt and Mesopotamia. We're leaving behind stone courtyards and honeyed wines, and stepping into another realm entirely. A land of silence, of frost, of breath that turns to fog in the air, where the stars are so clear, they seem etched into the night sky, with a silver needle. This is the ancient Arctic North, vast, empty, and alive with secrets. Here in these snow-laden forests and open tundras, something unexpected was happening. Highs were not just about pleasure, they were tools for survival, for storytelling, for speaking with ancestors and spirits that lived beyond the veil of the visible. This is the world of the shaman, and the shaman's doorway into the divine. A small red mushroom with white spots, Amanita muscaria. You've seen it before. It's the classic fairy tale mushroom, the kind that gnomes sit under in children's books. But its real story is far stranger. In Siberia, and among the indigenous peoples of the Ural Mountains, Lapland, and parts of northern Eurasia, the Amanita mushroom was not just admired, it was ingested in sacred rituals that aimed to pull back the curtain on reality. It wasn't recreational, it was a journey, and the guide was always the shaman. Imagine a wooden yurt, half buried in snow. Inside, a fire crackles. The smell of pine smoke and dried herbs hangs thick in the air. The shaman, dressed in reindeer skins, face painted with soot and ochre, sits cross-legged, eyes closed, holding a dried mushroom in their hand. Around them, a small group waits. They do not speak. They do not laugh. This is not a party. This is a ceremony. The mushroom is chewed, or more often fed to reindeer. Yes, reindeer. You see, Amanita muscaria contains toxins that can cause violent illness if consumed directly. But these toxins pass safely through the digestive system of the reindeer. And what emerges, yes, reindeer urine, retains the hallucinogenic compounds in a purified form. The people of the north observed this. They noticed that reindeer would deliberately seek out these mushrooms and appear visibly intoxicated, stumbling, dancing, even leaping high into the air. It was as if the animals themselves were visiting another world. So, the shaman followed suit. By drinking the urine of these altered animals, or sometimes the urine of someone who had already processed the mushroom, the shaman could safely access the mind-altering effects. It sounds strange, and it is, but for the people of the far north, this was sacred science. Once the effect took hold, the journey began. The room would twist and shimmer, the fire would hum and breathe, shapes emerged from the walls, the ceiling opened to the stars, and the shaman would leave their body, not in fantasy, but in ritual. They would climb the world tree, a towering axis mundi that connected the earthly realm to the heavens above and the underworld below. Through the smoke and visions, they would meet spirit animals, speak with ancestors, retrieve knowledge, and return with healing. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, the human soul stretched its wings. But it wasn't only the shamans who partook. Sometimes, entire communities joined these rituals. The goal wasn't to get high in the way we might understand it today. The goal was to shift the boundary between seen and unseen, between body and spirit. This practice wasn't chaotic. It was structured, often accompanied by drumming, chanting, and careful breathing. The heartbeat of the drum mirrored the heartbeat of the earth. The rhythm guided the traveler. It helped them return when the vision ended. Amanita muscaria doesn't produce the same hallucinations as modern psychedelics like LSD or psilocybin. Instead, it creates a state of altered reality that can include visual distortions, euphoric mood, dreamlike sequences, and sometimes deep introspective silence. It also causes vivid bodily sensations, floating, expanding, dissolving. To those who had never felt such things, it was divine revelation. Now picture this: a long winter night, stretching endlessly, a community huddled together, the outside world buried in snow. The only light comes from the fire and the flicker of eyes closed in meditation. The mushroom has passed from hand to hand. Time begins to melt. People rock gently. Someone begins to hum an old song passed down from their grandmother's grandmother. There is no urgency, no expectation, only presence, only the sacred rhythm. In some tales passed orally through the generations, It is said that the shaman would leave the tent barefoot in the snow and walk out to greet the stars, guided by visions. The cold didn't matter. They were elsewhere. They would return later with a message, a story, a vision, a warning, or a cure. In many cases, this practice helped heal not just individuals, but the entire community. Illnesses were not seen as purely physical. They were spiritual imbalances. Mental suffering, grief, nightmares, or misfortune were understood to be disruptions in the soul's alignment with the world. And so the shaman's job was not just to lead others through visions, but to bear the burden of insight, to travel into the dangerous places and bring back light. The mushroom itself became a symbol of that transformation, a bright spotted guide between worlds. It also birthed myths. Some historians even suggest that the modern image of Santa Claus, a jolly man in red and white, arriving from the snowy north, bringing gifts through the air, has roots in these Arctic shamanic traditions. After all, the shamans wore red and white, traveled with reindeer, and flew through altered states to bring blessings. But even beyond folklore, this tradition shows us something deeply human, that our ancestors weren't afraid to journey inward, that they valued the mind's hidden landscapes as much as the visible world. And they weren't alone. In the forests of what is now Finland and the Baltic states, other tribes used the same mushroom in slightly different ways. Some smoked it, others used it in ointments or infusions. The goal was often the same: to connect, to see, to understand. And in times of war, some warriors are said to have taken it before battle, to dull pain, to heighten courage, to enter a trance where fear could not reach them. They became mythic, unpredictable, more spirit than man. This was the birth of the berserker, the frenzied warrior, whose eyes burned with otherworldly fire. Whether this state was induced by mushrooms, exhaustion, or divine possession, is debated. But the experience of transformation, of leaving behind the ordinary, was real, and it was respected. So now, as you lie quietly, far from the frost and drums, let your mind wander to that distant yurt. Hear the fire crackling, feel the rhythm of the heartbeat drum, smell the smoke curling through the rafters. You are still, but your spirit moves. There are lights in the snow, there are voices in the silence. The mushroom in your hand is ancient and wise. You take a sip, not of reindeer brew perhaps, but of curiosity, of reverence, of the deep forgotten hunger to see more than the eyes can show. And in that quiet moment, you understand the shaman's journey. It wasn't about the mushroom, it was about the longing that lives in all of us, the longing to see what lies beyond. The Mediterranean is quiet tonight. A soft wind glides across olive groves, through the hills of Attica, and down into the stone streets of Athens. It carries with it the scent of sea salt and fig leaves, of resinous pine and crushed grapes left to ferment under the open sky. Somewhere far away, a lyre is being plucked. A chorus rehearses a tragedy. A poet murmurs verses to the stars. Welcome to ancient Greece, a land of logic and chaos, of order and ecstasy. The people here gave the world mathematics and philosophy, but they also knew how to let go. And at the heart of that surrender was a name whispered with both awe and wild abandon: Dionysus. He wasn't like the other Olympians, where Zeus ruled from on high. Dionysus wandered the earth. He wore ivy in his hair, and traveled with actors, drunkards, women and satyrs. He was divine, yes, but also deeply human. He knew longing, madness, joy and grief, and he was the god of wine. But to call Dionysus merely the god of drunkenness would be to miss the point entirely. Wine was only the beginning. What he truly offered was ecstasy, a stepping out of the self, a liberation from identity, hierarchy, and even time. To follow Dionysus was to be undone, and then remade. And the ancient Greeks, they followed. Let's begin in the heart of the symposium, the drinking party. Picture a room with walls painted in deep reds and blacks. Bronze oil lamps cast flickering light on scenes of gods and heroes. Cushions line the floor. Guests recline on one elbow, holding wide shallow cups called kylixes. The air hums with music, flutes, lyres, and rhythmic hand-clapping. In the center, a servant pours wine from a decorated crater. But this is no ordinary wine. It has been mixed with water, perhaps 2 or 3 parts. It might also be steeped with herbs, wormwood, thyme, mint, or resin. In some cases, opium was added. The concoction is earthy, fragrant, and potent in its own strange way. Each man takes a sip, not to forget, but to remember differently. Conversation follows a ritual order. First they talk of politics, ethics, war. But as the night deepens, the talk turns to love, poetry, the soul. They quote Homer and Sappho. They laugh, they weep, they argue over the nature of beauty. They lean closer, they recline deeper. The line between debate and dream begins to blur. This was not binge drinking. It was a ceremony. It was about transforming the self, shedding social masks, and entering a shared state of wonder. The Greeks called it enthusiasmos, literally, being possessed by a god, and Dionysus was that god. But if the symposium was the intellectual high, there was another wilder path, one that left the city behind and wandered deep into the forest. Here, under moonlight, the Menids danced. The Menids, female followers of Dionysus, wore fawnskins and carried thyrsuses, staffs wrapped in ivy and tipped with pine cones. They left their homes and families behind to join in ecstatic rites that took place far from the eyes of polite society. They sang, they screamed, they ran barefoot over rocks, they drank heavily, often wine infused with herbs, and they danced until they collapsed. Sometimes, they were said to tear wild animals apart with their bare hands, lost in divine frenzy. Whether literal or metaphorical, these tales reflect a deep truth. This was intoxication as liberation. In a society where women were often confined, the Menids became vessels of a power older than law. They weren't mad, they were sacred, possessed, free. And while the rites of Dionysus varied across time and place, they all shared one aim: to break the barriers of the ordinary mind. But there was an even deeper mystery. Not in the forests, not in the city, but in a small village called Eleusis, just outside of Athens. Here, once a year, for over 1,000 years, initiates gathered to take part in the Eleusinian mysteries, a secret ritual so profound that no one ever revealed what truly happened. They came by the thousands, emperors, peasants, poets, all were equal in the eyes of the mysteries. After fasting, praying, and walking the sacred way, they entered the Telesterion, a massive stone hall with no windows, and only one door. There, in darkness, they drank a potion called the kykon. It was made of barley, mint, and water, simple enough. But many scholars now believe it contained something else, something mind-altering. Perhaps ergot, a fungus that grows on grain and contains alkaloids, similar to LSD, or perhaps another forgotten plant, prepared in a way lost to time. Whatever it was, the result was profound. Those who drank the kykon reported visions of light, death, rebirth, the soul's journey. Plato wrote that those who participated no longer feared death. The experience wasn't just emotional, it was cosmic, and yet, they never told. Not because they were sworn to secrecy, though they were, but because the experience itself could not be spoken. It was beyond words. What the Greeks understood was that intoxication could be holy. It could be a passage to another state, not just of mind, but of being. And like all sacred things, it required ritual, intention, and respect. Even in everyday life, wine was treated with care. It was poured out as a libation to the gods, before it touched the lips of mortals. Its storage, mixing, and serving followed customs passed down for generations. And in the theater, that great Greek invention, actors performed in honor of Dionysus himself. Masks were worn, characters transformed. For a few hours, one became someone else. One saw the world anew. This too was a kind of high, a surrender, a celebration. not of losing control, but of touching something greater. And so now, as you lie in the hush of your room, let yourself recline alongside them. Feel the cool marble beneath your arm. Hear the soft splash of wine poured into a clay cup. Smell the resin, the mint, the olive oil on warm skin. You are not just a guest, you are an initiate. You take a sip. You feel warmth spread across your chest, your limbs, your thoughts. Not fast, not loud, just enough to melt the edges of your mind. Someone quotes Homer. Someone sings a hymn to Dionysus. You close your eyes. You are no longer entirely yourself. You are laughter and myth and memory. You are wine and God and story. And somewhere just for a moment, you glimpse eternity. You glimpse eternity. You glimpse eternity. You glimpse. Now let us journey eastward, across deserts and mountains, past crumbling ziggurats and sun-drenched temples, toward the vast and ancient subcontinent of India, a land where rivers are worshipped, syllables are sacred, and even the act of drinking can be an offering to the divine. Here, long before cities rose and kings ruled, people chanted hymns to unseen forces. They stared into the flames of their sacred fires and recited the names of stars, gods, and the inner self. They wrote poems not just for beauty, but to open portals. And at the center of this early spiritual tradition, in the Rig Veda, the oldest of the Vedas, the sacred texts of ancient India, there is a drink that stands above all others. It is called soma. Soma was not merely a beverage, it was a god, a force, a substance, a hymn, a mystery, and it was consumed in rituals to bring mortals into communion with immortals. It is described as radiant, golden, flowing. The one pressed by stones, mixed with milk, and filtered through wool. It was said to grant visions, strength, clarity, inspiration, and even immortality. But what was it? That is the mystery. To this day, no one knows exactly what soma was made of. The original plant or combination of plants has been lost to time. Some believe it was a species of ephedra, a stimulant. Others argue for Amanita muscaria. Yes, the same red and white mushroom used by Siberian shamans. Still others suggest it may have been a now extinct mountain herb, or even a combination of psychoactive ingredients, including cannabis or fermented honey. But perhaps that is the point. Soma was never just a plant, it was an experience. Let us imagine the scene. A fire altar is laid out with ritual precision, north, south, east, and west. Priests sit cross-legged, clad in white cotton, their hair tied back, their mouths murmuring rhythmic mantras that have been passed down orally for centuries. The sun rises over the Ganges plain. Cows low in the distance. The air smells of ghee, sandalwood, and river mist. At the center of the ritual, stone presses grind stalks, long green ones, possibly reeds, maybe something stronger. The juice flows into wooden bowls. It is mixed with milk, and perhaps honey, then filtered through sheep's wool to purify it. The final result is soma, thick, foamy, golden, gleaming like sunlight in a cup. The priests drink, and then they chant. They chant of fire, of wind, of the layers of heaven. They chant of Indra, the storm god, who drank soma before slaying the serpent that blocked the waters of the world. They chant of immortality, not in the body, but in the spirit. And as they chant, their breath slows, their eyes shine, and their minds begin to drift upward. It was not euphoria in the modern sense. It was elevation, a rising, a soaring toward truth. They believed that soma made the heart expand, that it sharpened the intellect, opened the third eye, and allowed a glimpse of the unchanging eternal self. Even today the word soma is used in Sanskrit to describe the moon and the sap of certain plants. Its symbolic power remains, but the actual plant, the living soma, has vanished. Still the memory lingers, and where soma may have faded, another drink took its place in the rituals and festivals of Indian life. A drink that still flows today during celebrations, prayer, and even quiet reflection. This drink is bang. Bang is made from the leaves and buds of the cannabis plant. It is ground into a paste, often mixed with warm milk, ghee, rose water, nuts and spices, cardamom, cloves, sometimes pepper or fennel. The result is a creamy, sweet and soothing concoction. Green, yes, but rich and golden at heart. And unlike soma, bang is no mystery. It is present, celebrated, shared. In Hindu tradition, bang is deeply tied to Lord Shiva, the god of destruction, meditation, and transcendence. Shiva is often depicted with a half-lidded gaze, seated cross-legged, on a Himalayan peak, with a chillum pipe in one hand and a river pouring from his hair. According to legend, Shiva discovered bang while wandering the mountains, exhausted from cosmic battles. He consumed the leaves of the cannabis plant, and was instantly restored, calmed, inspired, and awakened. Since then, his followers have offered bang to him during rituals, especially during the spring festival of Holi. During Holi, colors fly through the air. People sing, dance, laugh. Powdered dyes turn the streets into living canvases, and in many homes, bang is prepared in large clay pots. It is blessed, then shared, between friends, families, strangers. But bang is more than just a festival drink. It is a bridge. It allows the user to shift, subtly, softly, into a different state of being. Time slows, thoughts stretch, music becomes deeper, almost sacred. The world becomes less hard, more curved, more colorful. Imagine sipping bang on a rooftop in Varanasi. The Ganges winds below, pilgrims bathe in its holy water. Temple bells ring in the distance. A warm breeze carries the scent of marigolds and burnt sandalwood. You close your eyes, you feel stillness, you feel movement, you feel Shiva. Even in ancient Ayurvedic medicine, cannabis was recognized, though used carefully. It was seen as both poison and medicine, depending on how and when it was taken. It could relieve pain, improve digestion, calm anxiety, but it could also unbalance the mind if misused. As always in ancient traditions, intention mattered. And so, while modern cultures often divide substances into categories, legal or illegal, safe or dangerous, the ancients held a more nuanced view. A plant could be sacred, if taken with humility, and highness, so to speak, could be a form of worship. In some ascetic sects, holy men, known as sedus, renounce material life and roam the countryside, wearing ash and orange robes. Many of them still partake in bang, or smoke cannabis from chillums, as part of their spiritual practice. For them, intoxication isn't indulgence, it is detachment, a way to watch the world without clinging to it. In this way, getting high becomes not a turning away from life, but a deep, lucid step inward. And it's not just the sedus. In villages across India, older generations still prepare bang during religious ceremonies. It is offered to guests with hospitality and reverence. It is said to calm the nervous system, cool the body, and open the heart. For many, it's not an escape, but a return to softness, to connection, to the slow rhythm of breath and prayer. And as you now lie still, the modern world quieting around you, allow yourself to sip this history. Feel the thick, warm bang slide down your throat. Taste the cardamom, the ghee, the trace of cannabis behind the milk and sugar. Let your limbs grow heavy, not in burden, but in surrender. You are not escaping, you are expanding. You are not forgetting, you are remembering something deeper. A time when drinking was a sacrament, when words were chanted, not shouted, when the sky held gods, and the gods held cups. And you, dear listener, are simply drifting, like a prayer on the wind, like a prayer. Now the winds shift once more, brushing softly over the oceans, carrying our dreams westward, across waters unknown to the ancient Greeks and Egyptians, across tides uncharted by Indian sages or Siberian shamans. Let us now arrive in the Americas. Before the arrival of Columbus, before steel and gunpowder carved borders into the soil, The Americas were home to vast civilizations, intricate rituals, and deeply sacred relationships with the earth. These were cultures that listened to rivers and read messages in the stars, who treated each mountain, tree, and bird as a living soul. And they too had their ways of climbing beyond the veil of ordinary perception. Unlike many old world traditions that confined rituals to temples or initiated classes, in many indigenous American cultures, the act of altering consciousness was seen as a deeply communal, integrative, and even natural part of life. It was done not for amusement, but for balance, for healing, for prophecy, for truth. Let us begin with a desert. A wide sun-bleached plain, dry winds curling through cacti. A hawk circles high above. Below, a small circle of people gathers around a fire, their feet bare on the cracked earth. They are dressed in woven cloaks, embroidered with symbols that whisper of thunderbirds and spirit animals. In the center of the circle lies a small green thornless cactus. This is peyote, used for thousands of years by Native American tribes across what is now Mexico and the southwestern United States. Peyote is a sacrament, not a drug. Its small bitter buttons contain mescaline, a naturally occurring psychedelic that induces vivid visions, deep introspection, and a sense of merging with the universe. The Hukul Tarahumara, and later the Native American Church, used peyote in carefully guided ceremonies. Often these rituals would begin at dusk and last through the night, into the golden bloom of morning. A peyote journey was no small thing. It was approached with reverence and preparation. Fasting, chanting, prayer. The shaman or roadman would guide participants through waves of sound and silence, through drumming and storytelling, through laughter, tears, and visions. And what visions they were! Patterns danced across closed eyelids, snakes made of fire, mountains that breathed, ancestors walking through rivers of light. But these weren't hallucinations in the Western sense. They were messages, teachings, revelations of the inner world, mirrored through the face of the outer one. Many reported a sense of unity with nature, of hearing the heartbeat of the earth, of understanding plants and animals in ways beyond language. The pain in the body softened, the grief in the spirit lifted, the self for a moment became as vast as the desert sky, and yet the setting was humble. A fire, a song, a cactus passed from hand to hand. Now travel south, deeper into Mesoamerica, into the lush forests and pyramid-crowned cities of the Maya, the Zapotec, and the mighty Aztec Empire. Here the gods were many, and so were the paths to reach them. One of those paths was found in the form of small, unassuming mushrooms, called Teonanacatl, by the Aztecs. The name means flesh of the gods. These sacred mushrooms, now known to be species of psilocybe, were used in religious ceremonies to induce communion with the divine. Priests, nobles, and even commoners during certain festivals would consume them during veladas, or night-long vigils filled with prayer, music, and visions. Participants described journeys to the underworld, visits from deceased loved ones, and moments of overwhelming unity with the cosmos. But the mushrooms were never taken alone. They were almost always accompanied by chanting, incense, flowers, and most importantly, chocolate. Yes, cacao. Far from the sweetened confection we know today, ancient cacao was a bitter, spiced, and frothy drink made from crushed cacao, beans mixed with chili water, and sometimes honey or maize. The Maya believed cacao was a gift from the gods. It was used in rituals, sacrifices, marriages, and even funerals. And when combined with psychoactive mushrooms or other sacred herbs, it served as a kind of spiritual amplifier, an enhancer of visions, a conductor of divinity. Imagine a temple courtyard under the stars. A priestess sits cross-legged, a bowl of cacao in her hands. The liquid is dark, steaming, scented with cinnamon and smoke. She drinks slowly, then takes the sacred mushroom. Around her, the night air pulses with drumbeats. Jaguar masks dance in the firelight, and the veil begins to thin. The Mixtec peoples of Oaxaca, even created illustrated codices, folded books showing figures consuming mushrooms and entering ecstatic trance states. These were not mere feasts. They were doorways, and not all the intoxicants were taken by mouth. In parts of South America, especially in the Andes and Amazon regions, people developed snuffs, finely ground powders made from powerful plants. These snuffs were blown into the nose using hollow tubes carved from bone or wood. The experience was sudden, immediate, often overwhelming. One such substance was yopo, derived from seeds containing DMT and bufotenine. When administered by a shaman, the user would fall backward, eyes rolling, body trembling, not in distress but in surrender. It was said that in this state, the user could see the spirit realm, the jungle spirits, the ancestors, the cosmic animals that held the fate of the tribe. It was a dangerous journey, not taken lightly. In the Amazon basin, another sacred potion was brewed, ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is made from two key plants, the Banisteriopsis caapi vine, and the Psychotria viridis leaf. When boiled together for hours, they create a thick bitter tea that contains DMT, one of the most powerful hallucinogens known to science. But the presence of the vine allows the body to absorb it. This pairing was no accident. It was the result of deep plant knowledge passed down through thousands of years of experimentation and vision. The ceremony is led by a shaman, called a curandero, who sings icaros, spirit songs in the dark. The participants drink, sit and wait. What follows is not pleasure, it is not fun. It is a purge, a test, a vision quest. The body may tremble, the stomach may empty, the mind may crack wide open. Participants may weep, see the dead, feel their ancestors' hands upon their shoulders. They may become animals, they may become stars, but almost always, they emerge with something vital, a lesson, a release, a healing. The indigenous people who use these rituals do not speak of getting high. They speak of alignment, of balance, of setting things right in the spirit, before they can be fixed in the world. Even the coca leaf, chewed for millennia by Andean peoples, was part of this sacred balance. Chewing coca did not produce the intense high of refined cocaine. Instead, it delivered a gentle stimulant effect, helping people breathe and move in the high-altitude air, easing fatigue and pain. Coca leaves were offered to the gods, carried in ceremonial pouches, and shared among friends. To this day, travelers to Cusco, or the Sacred Valley in Peru, are offered coca tea upon arrival, not as a drug, but as a gift of the mountains. And so we see a theme, again and again. Intoxication was sacred. Plants were not consumed for escape, but for connection. Highness was not the goal, understanding was. And all of it, peyote, mushrooms, cacao, snuff, ayahuasca, coca, was integrated into the cycle of life, death, and spirit. So now, as you listen in the quiet stillness of your room, allow your breath to slow. Let the visions of these old ceremonies rise softly in your mind. You are sitting in a circle in the desert. A fire crackles. A cactus is passed to you with care. You are sipping cacao in a jungle clearing, your heart open, your eyes full of stars. You are chewing a coca leaf beneath the shadow of an Andean peak, the earth humming beneath your feet. You are dreaming, but you are not lost. You are remembering, somewhere deep inside, the old knowledge that plants are teachers, and that the body is not a prison, but a vessel for wonder. Sleep well, wonder, sleep. Now we drift farther. Still, farther east into the mists of ancient China, a land of jade mountains and bamboo forests, of paper lanterns swinging in still night air, of rivers that wind like silk threads through valleys, and sages who sit, unmoving, beneath pine trees for hours, watching clouds pass like thoughts. In China, the pursuit of altered states did not come in the form of wild dances or mushroom-fueled trances. It came slowly, quietly, and with purpose. Here, intoxication was not only about pleasure or revelation, it was about balance, immortality, and the precise tuning of the body. with the universe. To the ancient Chinese, the cosmos was a living organism, a flow of energy called qi, pronounced qi. Qi ran through everything: stones, stars, fish, trees, the blood in your veins, the breath in your lungs. To live in harmony was to keep qi flowing freely. To become sick, to feel grief, to become spiritually unmoored, was to fall out of harmony. So what did one do when the balance slipped? You turned to the alchemists. The ancient Chinese alchemist was not the kind you might imagine from Western tales of lead and gold. He, or sometimes she, was a seeker of the hidden forces of nature. Their goal was not wealth. It was immortality. And the path to that lofty goal was lined with herbs, minerals, elixirs, and deeply focused intention. Let us enter such a study. The room is dim. A breeze moves through the open wooden lattice. Ink scrolls line the walls, filled with looping characters about the Tao, the way. On a carved table, beside a jade mortar and pestle, lies a row of small ceramic jars, each labeled in ancient script, each filled with dried flowers, barks, stones, or powders. This is not medicine in the modern sense. This is transformation. The alchemist carefully measures a few threads of ginseng root, slices a pinch of ephedra, grinds dried lotus seeds, and adds a dusting of cinnamon bark. In some mixtures, they might add cannabis sativa, known as ma. In others, reishi mushroom, or the resin of frankincense. These ingredients are boiled slowly in clay pots until the steam carries the fragrance of forests and mountain winds. The resulting brew might taste bitter, sharp, even numbing, but that was expected. The tongue was not the target, the spirit was. Some of these concoctions produced mild euphoria, others induced deep stillness. Some cleared the mind, others warmed the blood. Some opened the dream world at night, and some were said to allow the practitioner to leave the body entirely, to meditate so deeply that the soul could travel among the stars, meeting immortals in the heavens. This was called external alchemy, the use of substances to transform the physical body into something divine. But alongside it was internal alchemy, a system of breathwork, visualization, fasting, and meditation. The two were often paired. A tea of cannabis and lotus might calm the body, allowing the mind to enter deeper stillness. A ginseng brew might stimulate qi, preparing the practitioner for long hours of breathing into the lower belly, guiding energy through the body's meridians. And in all of this, every cup, every breath, every chant, there was one purpose: to walk in harmony with the Tao. The Tao, the way, is not a god, it is not a being. It is the order of nature, the source from which all things arise and to which all things return. And to follow the Tao is to live well, peacefully, naturally, without resistance. Even intoxication, when done in harmony, was a way of following the Tao. Let us travel now through time to the Han Dynasty, a golden age of learning, poetry, and medical advancement. In the imperial court, elite physicians are writing the first great texts of Chinese medicine. The Shenong Ben Cao Zheng, or Divine Farmer's Classic of Materia Medica, lists 365 medicinal plants, divided into those that heal, those that sustain, and those that transcend. Among these plants is ma, cannabis. In early Chinese texts, cannabis is described as bitter, cooling, and beneficial for wind disorders, a poetic way of describing spasms, seizures, or mental agitation. The seeds were eaten for health. The flowers and leaves, when burned or steeped, were said to quiet the mind, relax the muscles, and open the gateway to communication with spirits. In fact, 1-2nd century Taoist text describes cannabis being used in incense burners during rituals intended to summon ghosts. The smoke, curling slowly through temple halls, helped both the living and the dead to listen more clearly. But even more intriguing were the writings about dream walking. Taoist mystics believed that through certain practices, including herbal use, chanting, and breathwork, one could travel in dreams not as a passive observer, but as a conscious traveler. In these dreams, one might fly over mountains, converse with sages of past dynasties, or glimpse one's future self. Cannabis, among other herbs, was used not to knock the mind unconscious, but to keep it lucid during sleep. This was a different kind of high, a high of clarity, of waking in the dream. And it wasn't just the mystics. In rural China, common people used herbs for everyday stresses. A tired farmer might drink a soup laced with lotus root and fermented rice. A grieving widow might chew ginseng to calm her breath. Children with nightmares were given teas of bamboo leaf and ma to ease their sleep. Even wine, that universal friend of altered states, had a role to play. But in China, wine was not guzzled. It was sipped, during poetry readings, under moonlight, beside plum trees in bloom. A Tang dynasty poet, Li Bai, famously wrote verses about drinking wine until his soul floated up to the stars, where he danced with the moon and his shadow. In that moment, wine wasn't a drink, it was a ladder to joy. And what of immortality? Some Taoist alchemists believed that, with the right elixir, the body could become incorruptible. They experimented with mercury, arsenic, and cinnabar, dangerous substances, yes, but taken in doses believed to align the spirit with the eternal. Many died in the attempt, but others lived long, healthy lives, not because they chased magic potions, but because they mastered the art of moderation, of slowness, of listening. And so we return now to you, here in your quiet space, your breath soft, your thoughts slowed, your body warm beneath the covers. You are the alchemist now. You are the one preparing your dream journey. Imagine a cup before you, steam rising, the scent of crushed lotus, dried ginger, and green leaf. You lift it to your lips, you drink. Your limbs grow light, your breath grows deep. The Tao flows around you, like water around stone. And in the soft spaces between thoughts, you begin to travel, not with your feet, but with your stillness. You are not asleep, you are simply elsewhere, and the stars blink, slowly, in approval. Drift now, if you will, into the air itself, not to lands or rivers or temples, but into something subtler, the realm of smoke, of perfume, of invisible intoxications. Through hallways lined with burning coals and spirals of incense, we enter a chapter not of drinks or potions, but of breath itself. For while many cultures ingested their transformations, chewing, sipping, swallowing, others preferred to inhale them, to breathe in the sacred, to surround the senses with rising vapors, fragrant tendrils, that carried not just aroma, but awakening. Let us begin where so many spiritual traditions have begun, with incense. Across the ancient world, from the temples of Egypt and Babylon, to the shrines of Japan and the monasteries of Europe, burning fragrant substances was not merely a way to cover bad smells. It was a ritual, a signal, a call to the divine. The moment smoke rose, something changed. Let us first return, briefly, to the ancient temples of Egypt. In the inner chambers where only priests were allowed, massive bronze burners held smoldering kaifi, a sacred blend of herbs, resins, wine, honey, and dried fruits. Each batch could contain as many as 16 ingredients, blended over days. Kaifi didn't just smell pleasant, it was said to heal the body, calm the mind, and elevate the soul. Some recipes even contained mild sedatives or psychoactive elements, like blue lotus, myrrhs, or juniper. As the smoke wound upward, priests sang hymns to the gods, the chamber filled with aroma, and the mind softened like wax before a flame. Imagine the silence, the flickering lamplight, the smell sweet, woody, thick like velvet. You breathe it in, and suddenly, you are not entirely here anymore. In Mesopotamia too, smoke was sacred. The Sumerians burned cedar, cypress and frankincense, offered to gods like Enlil and Inanne. Incense was not decoration, it was communication, a material transformed into spirit. The gods, it was believed, ate scent. Their appetite was for aroma, not bread. The use of frankincense and myrrh resins harvested from the arid trees of Arabia and the Horn of Africa became so important that entire kingdoms rose and fell on the incense trade. Camel caravans, stretching for miles, carried these sacred tears of the trees across deserts, over mountains, and into the very heart of empires. And why? Because people believed that burning incense could change the air. Yes, but also change the self. The Hebrews burned incense in the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber of the temple in Jerusalem. The book of Exodus even includes a sacred recipe for incense, considered so holy that it was forbidden to replicate it outside temple service. To burn it at the wrong time, or by the wrong hands, was not only disrespectful, it was dangerous. Not because of poison, but because of power. In ancient India, the smoke of agar wood, sandalwood and guggul rose during puja, worship. It was believed to clear negative energy, purify the space, and prepare the senses for prayer. In yoga and meditation, smoke was used to settle the breath, to coax the mind into stillness, not to stimulate, not to dull, but to align. And in China, the burning of mugwort, cinnamon, and sacred resins accompanied Taoist rituals. The smell wasn't ornamental, it was a map, guiding qi through the body, aiding trance states, and inviting benevolent spirits to draw near. But perhaps the most profound of these practices came from the high mountains and quiet monasteries of Tibet. Here monks crafted incense by hand, grinding herbs and woods according to formulas kept secret for centuries. These blends were used in long chanting sessions, in dream yoga, in silent meditation that lasted for weeks or even months. The scent, rising in curls, acted like a companion, a reminder, a gentle presence that kept the wandering mind tethered. Now, allow the smoke to carry you westward again, this time to the lands of the Islamic Golden Age. In cities like Baghdad, Cordoba, and Cairo, where science, poetry, and theology flourished, side by side, incense played a subtler, yet no less powerful role. In the hands of Sufi mystics, scent was used to induce ecstasy, not drunken ecstasy, but spiritual intoxication. It is said that certain Sufis would burn resins, chant the names of God, whirl in rhythm, and feel themselves dissolve, not in confusion, but in clarity. Their goal was fauna, the annihilation of the self, in divine love. Some used rose oil, some used sandalwood, some burned ambergris, the rare and mysterious gift of the sea. For them, scent was not only a path to God, it was God's breath. Even the concept of hashish, often misunderstood today, had a more layered past in certain Islamic cultures. In some poetic and mystical circles, hashish was described as a means to glimpse divine beauty, used carefully, ritually, in controlled settings. Sufi poets, like the famous Al-Kashani, referenced altered states brought on, not just by substances, but by the scent of jasmine, the taste of tea, the sound of music. These were spiritual highs, not chemical ones. Let us not forget the Catholic Church, where even today, during Mass, priests swing censers that release clouds of frankincense and myrrh. The scent signals the presence of the sacred. It marks transitions. It wraps the congregation in mystery. Many who have knelt beneath cathedral arches, watching the sun strike the smoke in golden shafts, have felt something shift within them. A lightness, a weeping, a stillness, and yes, a kind of high. And yet, despite all the sacred uses of smoke, there were others more personal, more domestic. In ancient Japan, nobles of the Heian period engaged in a practice called kodo, the way of fragrance. In these refined gatherings, guests would sit in quiet circles and inhale delicate plumes of burning incense, trying to identify its source, its mood, its poetic name. It was a game, yes, but also a meditation, a reminder that scent could hold memory, emotion, and eternity in a single breath. Even now, In our modern world, we still feel the pull, the scented candle, the burning sage, the breath of a forest after rain. These are echoes of old rituals, reminders that breath itself can be transformation. And so now, as you lie still, safe and quiet, imagine yourself in one of those sacred spaces. You are seated on a mat of woven grass. A small clay censer burns before you, its coals glowing softly. You do not speak, you do not think, you inhale. The smoke rises, not thick or choking, but gentle, curling like a ribbon in the moonlight. It smells of cedar and rose, of memories you didn't know you had, of places you've never been but miss all the same. You close your eyes, the world softens, and in that breath, in that single breath, you rise, not away, but inward, into stillness, into sleep, into the sacred space that exists only in silence and scent. Let us now step softly into an age often wrapped in mist and mystery, a time of cloistered monks and candle-lit cathedrals, of crumbling castles, quiet convents, and cobbled streets slick with rain. Welcome to medieval Europe. This was not an age of mushroom-fueled revelry or bacchanalian ecstasy. It was a time of contrasts, devotion and repression, superstition and scholarship, fear and faith. And yet, even here, in this somber, creaking world of bell towers and iron gates, people sought ways to lift the veil of reality, to alter their states, to feel closer to something, God, nature, power, or simply peace. But unlike the open rituals of the ancients, these medieval methods were more discreet, hidden, veiled beneath layers of symbolism, secrecy, and sometimes shame. Let's begin in a monastery. It is early morning. The sun has not yet risen. Monks in rough woolen habits shuffle silently through stone corridors. They chant softly in Latin, their voices echoing off damp walls. Candles sputter, bread bakes, and deep in the kitchen, a monk stirs a heavy wooden ladle through a bubbling pot. This monk is not a priest, he is a herbalist, a keeper of forgotten knowledge. In a time before pharmacies, monasteries were places of healing. Their gardens bloomed with lavender, sage, rosemary, and mandrake. Their libraries contained hand-copied texts from ancient Greece, Rome, and Arabia, describing plants not only for curing illness, but for soothing the soul. These monks brewed meads and ales infused with herbs, some to ease sleep, some to brighten mood, some perhaps without fully realizing it, to induce mild euphoria or a dreamlike calm. Among the most commonly used was henbane, a plant with yellow flowers and a dark reputation. In small doses, it relieved pain and induced drowsiness. In larger ones, it blurred the mind, caused hallucinations and sometimes madness. Yet it was not banned. It was cultivated, and it was used with care. Monks would often administer these brews to the sick and the dying, not just to dull suffering, but to help the soul pass gently into the next world. This was a spiritual service, a mercy. Imagine yourself as a tired pilgrim, arriving at a monastery after weeks on the road. Your feet are blistered, your stomach aches. A kind brother brings you a cup, warm, sweet, spiced. You sip. The bitterness is softened by honey. Your limbs relax, your thoughts slow. The world tilts just slightly, pleasantly. You sleep. And while monks worked within the boundaries of accepted healing, others stepped outside them. Let us now descend from the cloisters and into the villages. Here in small cottages, surrounded by herbs and fences of woven branch, lived the cunning folk, midwives, herbalists, and wise women. Some were healers, others were feared, many were both. These women, often labeled as witches in later years, were keepers of ancient plant lore passed down orally for generations. They knew which roots to chew for toothache, which leaves to boil for fever, and more secretively, which plants could send the mind soaring. The key ingredients: belladonna, henbane, datura, and mandrake. These plants, all members of the nightshade family, were incredibly potent. Their active compounds, atropine, scopolamine, hyoscyamine, could induce vivid hallucinations, sensations of flying, weightlessness, animal transformation, and even erotic visions. These effects, in too high a dose, were deadly. But with skill that often came from years of experimentation and tradition, they could be used to craft what became known as flying ointments. These ointments were made by extracting the active ingredients in fat or oil, often from pigs, geese, or sheep, and then applying them to the skin. Some were smeared on the forehead, chest, or temples. Others, in more intimate areas, where absorption was rapid and intense. And once applied, the journey began. The user might fall into a trance, their limbs heavy, their breath slow, and in their mind's eye they would rise. Accounts often recorded by inquisitors or clergy describe sensations of flight, of riding broomsticks through the sky, of attending moonlit Sabbaths with other witches. Whether these were literal or visionary is impossible to say, but what matters is this: they felt real. The sensation of flying, so often tied to these ointments, may have been the body's way of processing a state of weightlessness, a dissociation from the physical form, a drift into the astral. To the woman who had lived her life in toil, childbirth, grief, poverty, this flight may have been her only freedom. But freedom came at a cost. As the church grew increasingly wary of independent female healers, the line between medicine and heresy blurred. What had once been an honored tradition became a crime, and so the use of these plants, these salves, these subtle highs, had to move underground. Still they endured. Some were passed in secret, others hidden in fairy tales. The apple that made Snow White sleep, belladonna, the princess who pricked her finger and fell into a dream, poppy or mandrake. Even in darkness, the knowledge lingered. Back in the cities, more educated elites pursued altered states in quieter, more refined ways. Alchemists and natural philosophers experimented with distillations, essences, and tinctures. Some created aqua vitae, early forms of distilled alcohol, flavored with herbs and flowers. A few noted strange reactions when certain plants were infused and inhaled, producing states of calm, clarity, or confusion. In secret chambers lit by oil lamps, they wrote of noble vapors, elixirs of insight, and dreaming draughts. Yet they shared little, for in these times to admit too much was to invite suspicion. Still the urge remained, the desire to soften reality, to understand, to touch something greater, to escape, for just a moment, the cold weight of the world. And now, centuries later, you lie here in your bed, listening. The world outside is quiet, the night is thick, the shadows are long, but you are safe, and as your breath slows, you feel it, that same flicker of wonder, that the old midwife felt when she ground henbane under a full moon, that the monk felt when he stirred poppy seeds into warm wine, that the girl in the village felt when she smeared salve on her chest and dreamed she could fly. It was never just about the high, it was about the shift, from weight to weightlessness, from sorrow to song, from waking to dreaming. So close your eyes, and let the wind lift you. We've traveled far, across deserts and mountains, temples and tundras, incense smoke and sacred mushrooms. We've stepped into the temples of Egypt, the forests of Siberia, the olive groves of Greece, and the dream-brewing fires of the Amazon. And yet for every practice we've uncovered, every substance remembered, there are countless others, forgotten, lost not because they were unimportant, but because they were quiet, because the people who used them lived without leaving scrolls, or statues, or sacred texts. Their rituals were whispered, passed mouth to mouth, generation to generation, until one day they simply weren't. This chapter is for them, the forgotten herbalists of wind-swept islands, the stargazers in deserts, who fermented roots by moonlight, the forgotten tribes, whose sacred drink never made it into a colonial journal, the high priestesses, whose temple was swallowed by vines, the potions, powders and brews that never earned a name in history, but were once everything to someone. Let's drift into those shadows of memory, where hints remain, just barely. In the remote islands of the Pacific, long before contact with the Western world, there was a drink called kava, and still is today. Made from the root of the Piper methysticum plant, it was ground, chewed or pounded into a pulp, then mixed with water, and served in coconut shells. It didn't make one hallucinate. No bright colors or gods on the ceiling. But it brought calm, a mellow grounded contentment that spread through the body like warm surf lapping at your feet. In places like Fiji, Vanuatu, and Tonga, kava wasn't just consumed, it was celebrated. Poured out during peace treaties, shared at weddings, used in funerals, or just in slow, thoughtful conversation under starlit skies. The feeling it gave wasn't escape, it was presence, and yet there are others, far more mysterious. In parts of Ethiopia, it's whispered that ancient priests once brewed a thick, bitter liquid from the bark of a now-vanished tree, one that caused vivid dreams and gave prophetic visions. Some say it grew only on one hilltop, sacred and fiercely guarded. Others say it was struck by lightning and disappeared forever. No name for the drink survives, but old songs speak of the night bark and the mountain that made men sleep with their eyes open. In the Sahara Desert, long before cities like Timbuktu were built, the Tuareg and Berber peoples had their own customs. Some oral traditions tell of an herbal snuff made from crushed desert plants and powdered resins. It was said to allow camel riders to go for days without sleep, walking between waking and dream like a mirage that never fully faded. Today, only hints of those recipes remain, fragments in a traveler's journal, a tribal elder's faint recollection, or the patterns painted onto old tents. And in the Andes, while coca remains well known, there were other plants, now vanished from the landscape. Wild angel's trumpet, for example, was brewed by some to enter trance states. The knowledge of its preparation was guarded, for a wrong step meant death. Only the elders knew the proportions, the timing, the chance. Many of these formulas were not written, they were sung. Imagine it, an old woman sitting beside a fire, humming softly to herself as she stirs a brew. The tune isn't for music, it's a recipe. Every note corresponds to an ingredient, a moment, a turn of the spoon. If you know the song, you know the potion. If you forget the song, the recipe vanishes. Now drift further still into the rainforests of Borneo. Here some tribes once used the bark of a tree known only as the spirit drum. It was carved into pipes, boiled into teas, or powdered and placed in small leather pouches tied around the neck. It was believed to allow communication with forest spirits, not to control them, but to listen. In modern anthropology, these rites are only footnotes, mentioned by explorers who didn't stay long enough to understand. The tribe in most cases is gone. The tree logged, the songs unsung. And what of Europe before the rise of Rome? Before temples and togas, there were the megalith builders, the people who raised standing stones in Britain, Ireland, and France. The builders of Newgrange, Stonehenge, and Karnak. Who were they? What did they drink? What did they burn on the altars we no longer understand? Some archaeologists now believe that mushrooms, henbane or mead steeped in herbs, were used in solstice ceremonies. Pollen samples found near ancient fire pits suggest the use of plants known today to carry psychoactive properties. But no writing remains, only stones aligned with stars, only tombs filled with symbolism, only speculation and wonder. Even in Scandinavia, long before Vikings carved runes into stone, there were Saami shamans, dancing in furs beneath the northern lights, guided by drums made of reindeer hide and iron hoops. They too had their herbs, their smokes, their snow-buried secrets. And yet most of what we know is filtered through later interpretations, often biased, often fearful. Even the Aboriginal Australians, with their 60,000-year-old culture, the oldest continuous culture on Earth, used mind-altering substances that have largely been forgotten. their knowledge held in sacred stories not meant for outsiders. There are reports of a plant called pituri, chewed in small amounts to induce a trance-like state. But even that is debated, the full truth guarded by generations of Dreamtime lore. All of these lost rites, forgotten potions, and vanished highs share something in common. They mattered deeply to those who used them. They were not hobbies, they were not indulgences, they were part of a sacred rhythm, a rhythm of sowing and harvesting, birthing and burying, waking and sleeping, dreaming and returning. And even though we've forgotten the recipes, we still remember the feeling, the urge to soften reality, to see the world sideways, to sit with the invisible and listen. Even today that longing survives, in the way we light candles without knowing why, in the comfort we find in a warm drink on a cold night, in the strange hush of incense smoke curling through the air, in the dreams that feel like messages, in the stillness just before we fall asleep. And so now you lie here, safe, warm, listening, and you are part of that ancient lineage. You may not chew wild bark from a desert tree, you may not sip the song-brewed potion of a vanished tribe, but still, your heart beats with the same rhythm, the rhythm of seekers, of softeners, of dreamers. You close your eyes, and in the distance faintly, you hear it, a song without words, a cup with no name, a sigh from a world that no longer exists, yet somehow, still lives within you. Sleep well, wanderer of lost worlds. And now, we arrive at the quiet shore of our journey. The long wandering through ancient intoxications has brought us to this moment, this soft pause in time, where past and present meet like mist and morning light. You've drifted through temples and jungles, deserts and monasteries, fireside chants and moonlit visions. You've seen sacred flowers, steeped in wine, roots chewed in silence, smoke curling like prayers into the sky. You may be wondering, what was it all for? What did it mean? That human urge found across every continent, in every age, to get high. Why did they do it? And perhaps, why do we still long to? It would be easy to say it was about escape, about numbing pain, avoiding hardship, dulling the edges of a hard world. And yes, sometimes, it was exactly that. A weary body, a grieving heart, a long winter, a deep loneliness. Intoxication offered rest, relief, but that is not the whole story. Because so often those ancient substances were not taken to leave life, but to enter it more deeply, to see it more fully, to feel it more truthfully, to stand at the edge of the known and say, there must be more than this. And indeed there was. In Egypt the blue lotus offered a quiet smile beneath golden ceilings, easing the living into death, and perhaps death into something else entirely. In Siberia, the spotted mushroom showed shamans a world beyond reindeer and snow, a place of spirits and ancestors, a place that existed not in the sky, but in the mind, and in the rhythm of the drum. In Greece wine and wildness broke down the walls of status and ego. The Menids weren't mad, they were free. The philosophers weren't drunk, they were daring to feel. In India Bhang and Soma were not consumed in solitude, but in ceremony. They were not medicine, nor recreation, they were sacraments. The divine, made drinkable. In the Americas, the cactus, the vine, the mushroom, they weren't used to distract, they were used to heal, to understand, to commune with forests, animals, the stars. In China the alchemists and sages didn't chase highs, they sought harmony, a state of being so aligned, so still, that intoxication and meditation became one and the same. And in medieval Europe, in the dark corners between monastery and marketplace, monks and midwives whispered to the plants. They brewed soft sleep into ale, they painted dreams across ointments, and for just a moment, just one evening, or one trance, the world opened. There was a through line in all of it, a pattern, a pulse. Human beings have always sought to reach. We reach for gods, for understanding, for peace, for flight. We are not content with only what we see. We want to touch what lies beyond. And for millennia, we did so with the help of the earth. It gave us roots to chew, leaves to steep, bark to burn, fungi to honor, waters to stir, breaths to guide inward. The highs of ancient times were not neon-lit or synthetic. They were earthborn, ritual-wrapped, and intimately human. And maybe that's why we remember them, even when the ingredients are lost. Maybe that's why the stories still stir something inside us, because they remind us that this life, this body, this breath, is a mystery worth exploring, not by running from it, but by moving through it more attentively, more curiously, more gently. These substances were teachers, not always safe, not always wise, but always human. They reflected our deepest longings, the longing to connect, to heal, to feel joy, to understand the rhythms of nature, to commune with the divine, to say I am here, I am alive, I want to feel more. Even today, echoes remain. We light incense without knowing why. We sip herbal teas in silence. We close our eyes when music swells. We breathe deeply in forests. We dream, we drift, we reach, and somewhere deep inside us we carry that old memory, the collective knowledge of thousands of ancestors who once, just like you, sat beneath stars and let themselves be transformed. Their rituals may be gone, their recipes faded, but the feeling remains. The stillness after the cup is past, the hush after the chant ends, the warmth behind the eyes, just before sleep takes over. And now, dear listener, you are there too, wrapped in the soft quiet of this very moment. You don't need blue lotus or peyote. You don't need mushrooms or myrrh. You have your breath, your body, your curiosity, your sleep. And sleep, after all, is its own kind of high, a gentle surrender, a letting go, a sacred transformation. So let yourself drift. You've traveled far, through time, through dreams, through smoke and story. And now you may rest. You are not escaping. You are returning to stillness, to softness, to sleep. Good night, traveler. And thank you for dreaming with me. You for dreaming with me. You for dreaming with me.